We're go.
All right. Good morning, everybody. It's Friday 17th and June, middle of June. In fact, this week, June 22nd, I think will be June 21st or 22nd will be the longest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere and the shortest day in the Southern Hemisphere. So the slaughterhouse of failure is not in our destiny. We shall persevere until we succeed. Augmandina modified. So today we've got a little program for you about failing forward. Failing forward. And we're going to chat a little bit about, it's always about mindset. Everything is about mindset. So Dan, you want to?
Yeah, I'll start. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. So, first thing I wanted to start off with was, did you know there's actually a term for the fear of failure? It's called adicophobia. And so it may actually cause you to put off or avoid any activity or scenario that has a potential for an unsuccessful outcome. It's a fear of failure, right? Someone with this condition, they're going to be scared to try new things. They're going to have a fear of taking risk or embracing growth just because they have this fear of failure. So, what you don't want to do, we always talk about failing forward. What you don't want to do is fail backward. No, we don't ever talk about failing backward. That's just failure, right? Not having that fear or having that fear and you fail backwards. But what that does is it really sets you back tremendously. It's going to add to your self-limiting beliefs. It's going to add to your anxiety about what you're doing. Other people are going to question whether or not you're failing or why you're failing. So, you really need to concentrate on, failing forward. And when you have those setbacks, think about charging forward into the future rather than letting these self-limiting beliefs and this fear of failure, this adicophobia, from helping you move forward or failing forward. So, if you want to succeed, you want to double your failure rate. That's a quote from Tom Watson, the CEO of IBM. And success doesn't happen overnight. It happens as a result of failing over and over and over until you finally succeed. People who are afraid of this failure, their growth gets stunted. Their dreams are shattered. They live their life in a haze of mediocrity, as Lawrence puts it. They never really reach their full potential because their mindset won't allow them to be the best version of themselves. They have this fear of failure. What do you want? Will you let fear of failing hold you back? What is keeping you from reaching the best version of yourself or your highest potential? Is it fear? Is it adicophobia? What is it? To know what's holding you back, you first need to know what that is and define it. And in a lot of cases, most cases, it's that fear of failure, fear of being outside of your comfort zone. So you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, and failure is actually something that could be devastating or exciting. It just depends on how you see it. If you see a failure as something that's, oh my gosh, it's doom and gloom and I'm never going to do this again, and it's just a horrible situation, horrible event, and you don't learn from it, you're failing backwards. If you fail and you say, wow, well, that was a bit of a roller coaster, I screwed up on that, but what's exciting? I really learned something really valuable from that. And by learning something valuable from your failure, you're failing forward. You're looking forward to overcoming the next problem that there might arise. So it's an attitude of failing forward and absolutely not being afraid of failure. There are a lot of different fears that we have, and fear is, as we've always said, false evidence appearing real. It's not a real thing, it's in our mind. But if we allow it to dominate negatively, we'll fail backwards. But if we embrace the failure and learn from it, we're failing forward. And then it becomes exciting because you say, well, I can dominate this now. I can I can go forward.
Absolutely. And, when you feel comfortable with that failure, when you feel comfortable with being uncomfortable, because ultimately failure makes you feel uncomfortable, that's when you're going to see your largest gains, right? And when you start to see those gains, you're going to work harder, you're going to work smarter, you're going to work longer, you're going to work without the fear of failing, right? And without the fear of failing, you have nothing holding you back. What's holding you back at that point? So, I try new things. I jump at the chance to try new things not because of the fear of failure, but because of the fight of failure. Fighting through failing at something is one of the greatest joys that I get in life, is doing something that I maybe didn't think that I could do, or somebody else didn't think I could do, and actually fighting through the resistance of trying something new and not being great at it, and ultimately succeeding at it. That's what really drives me. Why would I want to do something because I won't fail? There's so much more when you fail. There's so much more gratitude. There's so much more positivity that you feel within yourself when you fail. And so, in our culture, a lot of people believe that contentment comes from attaining material possessions or positions of power. Contentment is felt because you're comfortable where you're at, right? And you have this contentment that is holding you back, not because of a fear of failure, but because you have what you want, or you think you have what you want, or you are where you think you want to be in life, or where you're capable of going. You're not looking to surpass what you think is possible for you. But contentment comes from having a positive attitude as well. It really means, expecting the best in everything that you do, not the worst. It's all about mindset, right? Just like Lawrence said, everything's about mindset. It's about remaining upbeat, even when you get beat up. Seeing solutions in every problem, not problems in every solution. Believing in yourself, even when others don't believe in you, or when you believe you failed, or others have believed that you failed. Holding on to hope, even when others say it's hopeless. That's where contentment comes from. And that's where you start to change your attitude from being one of a negative attitude to one of a positive attitude. Expecting the best, remaining upbeat, seeing solutions in every problem, believing in yourself, and holding on to hope that you can achieve what you set out to achieve. So no matter what happens to you, a positive attitude comes from within. You have 100% control over your mindset. You don't have 50%. You don't have 75%. You have 100% control of what's going on in your mind, and whether it's positive or whether it's negative. So rely on a positive attitude today to get you through those difficult circumstances, those failures.
Absolutely. Contentment, as you're talking about being positive and so on, the Dalai Lama says that piece of contentment is not being in a state of unsatisfactoriness. So again, it's how well do you know what you want? How well do you know yourself? So that you're not going to be unsatisfied, or dissatisfied rather, with stuff that is sometimes out of your control. Even when results are below expectation, find something good about the outcome. Whatever that failure was, there's something good that's coming from it that you got to learn from. Learn from the beating. Be grateful for the lesson. Don't beat yourself up. When we had the crisis of COVID, Dan said, don't waste this crisis. That was a world crisis that we didn't know what was going to happen. And yet the way to look at that is, instead of saying, OMG, this is a really terrible situation, and we're all gonna die, we're all gonna have some major issue, Dan said, don't waste this crisis. And that was, I think, one of the key factors of mindset, where you look at something and say, there's a problem. Okay, let's look at the advantages within that problem? How can we thrive within that problem? So, I used to say, even because I've snorkeled in manure quite a few times in my life. So even when you're snorkeling in manure, know for sure who you are. Know your own resilience. Things sometimes go really bad and we think, oh my God, terrible, and we're snorkeling in this terrible situation. Well, you've got to have the faith to know who you are. And this is what it's all about, to be absolutely sure that you're going to come out of it. And it's a mindset. It's an attitude of positivity. And that attitude of positivity will actually help you get out of any situation, no matter how deep or tragic it apparently is.
Yeah, and when I said that, when the COVID first started, Lawrence, and when I said don't waste this crisis, little did I know, everybody thought a couple months into it, everybody's like, this is going to last a little short period of time. A couple months later, everybody's like, the sky is falling, the world's coming to an end, we're going to cease to exist, blah, 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 blah. And in the middle of all of that, I get kicked in the shins with a cancer diagnosis. Little did I know when I said, don't waste this crisis, that the crisis for me was going to be failure, the failure of my health. Right. But how you respond to that is what is going to define your character moving forward. And, quite honestly, it's probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. I had lost my passion for just about everything. I was, no longer happy with my job at Zimmer Biomet for a number of years. And, I was ready to retire and all of those things. And, this cancer diagnosis really gave me a renewed vigor for life, and it gave me a new passion. And, to achieve your highest potential, you really have to learn how to fail forward. I mean, that was the biggest failure in my life, and it was a failure of me taking care of my body for the last 45 years. Lots of stress, lots of anxiety, not eating properly, not sleeping properly, being exposed to radiation in the operating room, lots of different things. But, for the wide majority of us, life isn't easy, and we're faced with many challenges, but it's how you perceive and respond to those challenges that determines your ability to succeed. Right? It has nothing to do with how you deal with successes, because successes are going to propel you forward no matter what. It's the failures that are going to define and determine your ability to succeed.
Well, think about what you just said, Dan. You were slapped with a life-threatening disease, and that was a curveball, and it was a consequence of your shirking or listening to your body over the years, because you had symptoms of something for some time before that. Well, the exciting thing is that once you overcame that, you then look at life through different lenses. You look at life through an exciting next chapter of your life, knowing that you've learned a lot about yourself. You've learned a lot about something new that happened that was terrible, but you were out of the routine, the comfort zone of routine of life, which you had been in for so many years. So that's what makes it exciting, when we learn from some terrible thing, or we learn from an adversity, and then it becomes exciting when we go forward. So, the struggle is real, but so is the reward. To fail forward means to purposely and deliberately use failure to find success. So we're looking at real life situations, whether it's, and the health, I think, is the worst possible challenge we can have. But financial is also a challenge. Time, relationships, all of these are challenges that we all face every day with our families. And we've got to fail forwards with that.
Yeah, and COVID's not over. COVID's still here. Now we're starting to hear about monkeypox. I had cancer. I want to make everybody on this call aware that there's another virus coming down the pike. If you get sweaty while putting gas in your car, if you start feeling sick when you're paying for it, you may have car owner virus. So to fail forward, guys, you need to purposefully and deliberately use failure to find success. It's a conscious process. We first have to give in to our obsessive need to be perfect. We have this obsessive need to not let anybody see our flaws, to succeed at all costs, to never fail. But life's perfectly imperfect, and so are we. When we try to be perfect, we're limiting our ability to grow because we're living within our comfort zone, because we don't want people to see our flaws. Because we stay in our comfort zone, we even avoid healthy risks. When we seek perfection, we limit the power that we have in our minds to succeed, because we're not looking to fail. We're not embracing failure as a way to succeed.
So we're talking about the ego in this case as well. When we want to be perfect and we want to have everything working absolutely right, absolutely perfect, well, that's the ego. Let go of the ego. Know that you're perfect in your imperfection. We are all perfect in our own imperfections, and the desire to be perfect and to make everything right and to hold, to be perfect, to have perfect results, holds us back. And sometimes we miss out on opportunities because we think we can't do it right. Well, who cares? Who cares if you don't get it right? Just do it and learn from it. And eventually you'll get it right. It's a bit like become a chess master. You play chess and you get beaten for the first 5 million times. And eventually, from each one of the beatings that you've had on chess, you become really good at it. You become a chess master. And it's through learning and through leaving the ego out of it. No matter, it doesn't matter. So you didn't succeed at the beginning. You didn't succeed for a month or 3 months or a year. Or just stick with it, because that's what perseverance and again, it's all about how our attitude is, how we want to succeed, what we want to succeed. Just be aware all the time. And by living in the abundance and by living in the abundance, we'll eventually only see the roses and not the weeds. We'll be able to focus on just positive things and not worry about the things that are holding us back.
Yeah, just as we can learn to change our mindset from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, we can also learn to embrace failure. We can learn how to fail forward. Just because you don't know how to fail forward doesn't mean you can't learn how. And so, if you're just learning how to embrace failing and failing forward, start small. You don't have to step way outside your comfort zone. Just step a little bit out of your comfort zone, baby steps, right? Do a little, keep pushing that envelope until you do something big that you never thought you'd be able to do. So, that slightest elevation is going to allow you to move forward. And then you want to regain control. Like I said, we can control 100% over our thoughts and feelings of our minds. You can train yourself to eliminate negative thinking, replace it with positive thoughts, right? You can train yourself to do that. Life's just a big classroom. We attract what we need to heal. When something happens that triggers a fear, you can change your perspective about it. And, you can choose to control your thoughts and focus on the good to come forward, not on the failures that have happened in the past or in the present. And then thirdly, face every fear. It sounds really scary when you say, I'm going to face every fear and not back down from it. But, true fear, if you want true freedom, you need to take control over your life. Don't let anybody else control your life. You and you alone should be in control of your life. We have to face every fear. Most fears are irrational, right? We have a fear because we've learned to fear something, because we were taught to fear something. It's based on the ego's need to be in control all the time. That's why we're afraid to face fear. When you face your fears, you're going to take that control back and you're going to move forward and you're going to succeed. So failure is a part of life. If you're not failing, you're not giving it all you got. If you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. If you're not failing, you're going to have a difficult time moving forward. Redefine failure and use it to fail forward.
Well, your own history of facing challenges, and remember that we are 100% in charge of our own minds. We are in charge, totally in charge of our own way of thinking. People say, oh, he made me cry. Really? He made me cry? It's impossible. Cannot make you cry. You cried because of a consequence. And we are the people that we have with the destinies in our own hands. And it's up to us to be able to separate anything that is not conducive to something that we embrace as positive and that we like. We have to have some challenges, and we do them. But the consequences are our own destination, our own consequences.
Absolutely. It's all about your mind. It's all about the mindset. It's all, successful. If you saw in the very beginning, I posted a picture. Successful people blame themselves. Unsuccessful people blame themselves for their failures. That's a mindset. Are you in charge? Are you in control of your destiny? Are you in control of your emotions? Are you in control of how you face fear? You can control that. Don't let anybody else control it. You and you alone should be in control of that, because ultimately that's going to determine your destiny. So Lawrence, you want to open it up for thoughts, comments?
Yeah, if anybody wants to say anything or add anything, any comments? Good.
I'll say that when we see someone successful, we often don't see the failures and struggles that pave the road to that success. All we focus on, is the success. We don't see what happened before that, and without those failures, the success would never have happened. Learning experiences.
That's true.
Yeah, and one of the things that drives me crazy is when somebody looks at somebody who's successful and they say, wow, he's really lucky. He's not lucky. He worked hard. More than likely, he worked hard. He or she learned to be comfortable with failure, learned to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, learned to be comfortable with stepping outside their comfort zone. There's no luck in success. Success is just hard work, mindset, how you deal with failure. Are you going to fail forward, or are you going to fail backward?
Luck is where preparation meets opportunity.
Jocko Willink, learn to be comfortable with taking full ownership of all the decisions you made. When you have people in your team and maybe they're not succeeding, lay it on yourself. Don't lay it on anybody else. And as much as you think it's their fault, lay it on yourself anyway. And you with them, hopefully you'll find the resolution to whatever it is they're facing.
I mean, another thing is
Go
be
ahead, Steve.
more afraid of not doing it than doing it, right? So if you look at things like, okay, you might be afraid of making a phone call, but be more afraid of not making that phone call because it's lost opportunity. What if somebody else ends up talking to your prospect first, your best friend first? I'm doing an event tomorrow, and I could be afraid of going out there and promoting the event to other places in the community, or I could be afraid of going to this event tomorrow and not having people show up. So I'm more afraid of not having people show up than I am going out there and talking to some new people and promoting the event. And so be more afraid of not doing it than being afraid of doing it.
Well, being afraid of people not showing up is a fear of, did I do enough to promote the event? Did the other people do, whoever I'm doing it with, did they do enough to promote the event? And so that's subconsciously, that's a fear of failure. It's not the fear doesn't come from whether you're going to sign people up on product or how many people you're going to scan. It's how many people actually show up, because if nobody shows up, it's a failure, right? You're wasting your time, you're wasting your energy.
I'm more afraid of sitting home and not promoting the event than I am of going out this afternoon and chunking out 2 hours of my day to go promote it.
Yep. Perfect. And I love what you said, Michael, about, people, when they don't look at people, what they had to persevere through to be successful, or they haven't, looked at the sacrifices, because success takes a lot of sacrifice. You're going to sacrifice is even failing. That's a form of sacrifice, and not being afraid to fail. But to be successful, you really need to sacrifice a lot and to move forward. And I love what Jim said. We need to shoulder that burden of people that aren't doing or being successful on our teams. Is it something that we have done or what we haven't done that is causing them to not be successful? Or have we not motivated them in the proper way?
Well, as a team leader, that's what it's about. It's about filling in the gap of even the weakest link of the chain, and being able to support that and to take it upon ourselves. Martin, you had something?
I was just thinking about I was just thinking about a very interesting aspect of this, which is this is all part of our self-education, and maybe it's how we've been nurtured or how we've been educated ourselves, or what the stimuli are that we've been exposed to. And it made me think of Sarah Blakely. Sarah Blakely, many of you may know, she is a self-made billionairess, and there aren't very many of those. And she basically, during her childhood, her father used to have all her and her siblings at the dinner table, and he would ask them, "What have you failed at today?" And when you think about that, it gives you permission to fail, permission to experiment, permission to make those bold steps and see if what you're thinking about is going to work. Is it going to work for you? And what lessons do you learn from it if it doesn't? Very cool.
That we could we can be trained to fear failure, or we can be trained to accept failure as part of the process. I love that.
Yeah. Necessary steps on the way.
Yep. All right.
Thank you.
Lawrence, do you have any other further comments?
Not really. If anybody else wants anything else to add? Okay, so go look yourselves in the mirror and go and find out who you are, and take the necessary action to have faith in yourselves, in ourselves, every day. The first step is the one we take when we get out of bed. Just be confident. Thanks everybody for being on the call. Dan, thank you. Thanks for your input, Mike and Martin and Steve.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thanks, Riley. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Guys, great call.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good
Be
day.
careful out there, car owner virus.
I'm off to the pub. Thank
See
you,
guys.
guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.